She thought it would be just one night, a contract. $50,000 to pretend she belonged in his world. But when Lucas Sterling knelt before her beneath the chandelier lights and slid a ring onto her finger, Emily Cooper realized something terrifying. The line between pretending and feeling had already blurred. And when he whispered, "Nothing gets canceled tonight," she knew her heart had just signed a contract she could never break. The smell of cold coffee and old paper filled Emily Cooper's small studio in Brooklyn. The peeling walls seemed to bear witness to every silent despair. Every unpaid bill stacked on the scratched wooden table. The March afternoon light came in timidly through the dirty window, illuminating dancing dust in the air, small particles that seemed to float with the same uncertainty that dominated her life at that moment. At 28, Emily had built a promising career as a freelance graphic designer. But reality was relentless. Losing her biggest client meant losing the ground beneath her feet. She held the eviction notice between trembling fingers. The rough paper seemed to burn her skin. 3 months of overdue rent. The landlord, Mrs. Chen, had been patient, too patient. But even patience has its limits. Emily closed her eyes and took a deep breath, trying to control the knot tightening in her throat. The apartment's silence was deafening, broken only by the distant hum of traffic below and the irregular sound of her own breathing. That's when her phone buzzed. Unknown number. She hesitated, her thumb hovering over the cracked screen. Normally, she'd ignore it. But there was something about that afternoon, maybe desperation, maybe intuition, that made her answer. Emily Cooper. The male voice on the other end was deep, controlled, loaded with an authority that made each syllable sound like a decision already made. Yes. Who's this? Her voice came out weaker than she intended. My name is Marcus Webb. I work for the Sterling family. I have a proposal that might interest you. Sterling. The surname echoed in her mind like a church bell, impossible to ignore. Everyone in New York knew the Sterlings. They weren't just rich. They were power consolidated over generations, names engraved on marble plaques in hospitals and universities. Emily sat up straighter in the creaky chair, her heart racing. What kind of proposal? There was a calculated pause. $50,000 for one night. Total discretion. The world seemed to stop. Emily heard the sound of her own blood pulsing in her ears. $50,000. The amount danced in her mind like a mirage in the desert, close enough to seem real, distant enough to seem impossible. One night of what exactly? She forced firmness into her voice, though her hands were shaking. Companionship. Mr. Lucas Sterling needs someone for his cousin's wedding, someone who can play a convincing role as his girlfriend. Emily let out a bitter laugh. You're asking me to pretend to be a millionaire's girlfriend? Billionaire. Actually, the correction came with a touch of dry humor, and yes, basically that. Attendance at a social event. Appropriate behavior. No questions afterward. You get paid the next morning. Every rational fiber in Emily screamed to refuse. This sounded like the beginning of a bad thriller, or worse, like a trap, but the pile of bills on the table, the eviction notice, the nearly empty fridge, all of it weighed like anchors, dragging her to the bottom. Why me? She asked, genuinely confused. Surely you know women more suited for this kind of thing. Mr. Sterling was specific. He doesn't want someone from his social circle. He needs authenticity, someone real. There was a pause. Your online portfolio caught his attention. He appreciates genuine talent. Emily blinked, surprised. Lucas Sterling had seen her work. The idea seemed absurd and intriguing at the same time. I need to think. You have until tomorrow at 9 a.m. If you accept, meet Mr. Sterling at Café Libre, Upper West Side, at 10. Otherwise, this conversation never happened. The call ended before she could respond. Emily sat there, phone still against her ear, staring at nothing. The apartment seemed even smaller now, the walls closing in, the air denser. She stood and walked to the window, watching the busy street below. People went about their lives, hurried, indifferent, each carrying their own invisible weights. $50,000. One night. What kind of man hires someone to pretend to be his girlfriend? What kind of life requires that kind of elaborate lie? And more importantly, What kind of person would she be if she accepted? But then her eyes landed again on the eviction notice, on the overdue electric bill, on the maxed-out credit card. Reality wasn't romantic. It was cruel and relentless. And sometimes surviving required making choices she never imagined making. That night, Emily barely slept, lying in the narrow bed covered by a thin sheet that had seen better days. She stared at the cracked ceiling illuminated by the orange light from the street lamps. Her mind wouldn't stop spinning. Images mixed together. Lucas Sterling's imagined face shed, looked him up on Google-defined jawline, piercing eyes, calculated smiles at charity events, the ballroom that would surely be the wedding venue, the dress shed need to wear, the words shed need to say. What if she said yes? What if for one night she pretended to be someone shed, never been someone who belonged to a world of crystal chandeliers, expensive wines, and empty conversations about investments and trips to Europe? It challenged everything she believed about herself. Emily had always prided herself on her authenticity, on never selling out her integrity. But integrity didn't pay rent. Authenticity didn't put food on the table. At 7 inches the morning, when the city began to wake with the distant sound of horns and the rustling of pigeons on the window ledge, Emily grabbed her phone and typed a simple message. I accept. It'll be there at 10. Café Libre was exactly the kind of place Emily imagined millionaires frequented when they wanted to seem normal. Bookshelves lined the exposed brick walls. The comforting smell of fresh coffee mixed with the gentle aroma of old pages, and a warm golden light bathed the space through tall windows. Instrumental music played softly in the background, something classical, refined, that seemed to whisper, "You don't belong here." With every note, Emily arrived 5 minutes early, her palms sweating inside the pockets of her worn coat. She'd chosen her best outfit, simple black pants, and a white blouse that, though clean and pressed, made it clear it didn't come from any boutique. Her green eyes scanned the room until they landed on him. Lucas Sterling sat at a corner table near the window, and even from afar, even without ever having seen him in person before, Emily knew immediately it was him. There was something in the way he occupied space, not arrogance, but an undeniable magnetic presence. He wore a dark gray sweater over a white shirt, perfectly tailored dark pants. His honey-colored eyes, lifted in the morning light, met hers, and the world seemed to tremble. Emily walked to the table, each step feeling heavier than the last. When she got close, he stood an old-fashioned, gentlemanly gesture that caught her off guard. Emily Cooper. It wasn't a question. His voice was exactly as she'd imagined, deep, smooth, with a velvety texture that seemed to glide through the air. Thank you for coming. I didn't really have much choice, did I? The words came out more defensive than intended. A half-smile touched his lips. There's always a choice. You chose to be here, and I appreciate that. He gestured to the opposite chair. Please sit. When Emily sat, he did the same, and for the first time she could really observe him. Lucas Sterling was handsome, but it wasn't just that. There was an intensity to him, something in his eyes that suggested layers upon layers of unspoken thoughts. There was also tiredness there, an almost imperceptible shadow beneath that mask of control. Coffee? He offered, already raising his hand to call the waiter. Yes. Black. Emily didn't trust her voice to elaborate further. They sat in silence while the coffee arrived. Steam rose from the white cup, an artistic leaf design made in the foam she hadn't even ordered. When they were finally alone again, Lucas leaned slightly forward, his forearms resting on the table. I imagine you have questions. Several. Emily held the cup between her hands, the warmth soothing her cold palms. Starting with, why me? You don't know me. You don't know anything about me beyond what's on Google. That's exactly why. He took a sip of his own coffee, his eyes never leaving hers. Everyone in my circle wants something: money, status, connections. You just want to survive. It's honest. Refreshing, even. The sincerity in his voice disarmed her. Emily had expected arrogance, maybe condescension, but there was something genuine there, something human beneath all that wealth and power. And what exactly do you want from me? She forced herself to maintain eye contact, though every cell in her body screamed to look away. One night. My cousin Matthew's wedding is on Saturday in the Hamptons. I need you to attend with me. Act like my girlfriend. Smile. Make conversation. Be present. And after, you get $50,000 and never have to see me again. It should be simple, clear, transactional. But there was something in the way he said never have to see me again that sounded almost sad. Why can't you just go alone? Lucas sighed, running a hand through his dark hair. My family, they have expectations. My mother especially. She's determined to see me married, settle down, as she puts it. If I show up alone again, it'll be an entire night of forced introductions, awkward matchmaking. I don't have the patience for it. So you'd rather lie? You'd rather control the narrative. He stared at her with those golden eyes that seemed to see right through her. It's a temporary lie to avoid permanent drama. Emily took a sip of coffee, letting the bitterness dance on her tongue. There was logic there in a twisted way. But there was also danger. She could feel it like an electric current in the air between them. Are there rules? She finally asked. Boundaries? What I can or can't do? Say? Lucas pulled something from the inner pocket of his jacket, a folded paper. He slid it across the table. Basic contract. Confidentiality. Payment terms. Protection for both of us. Emily unfolded the paper, her eyes scanning the lines of legalese. Everything seemed professional, almost clinical, and then she saw the last line, handwritten at the bottom, authenticity above all. Be yourself just with us. She looked up, confused. Be myself? My family is good at detecting fakeness. If you try to be someone you're not, they'll know. Lucas leaned closer, and suddenly the space between them seemed to disappear. So be honest. Be real. Just pretend you love me. Emily's heart skipped a beat. Pretend I love you. She repeated the words as if testing their weight. Yes. And you'll pretend you love me too. Their eyes met, and something unspoken passed between them, a spark, a recognition, something neither of them expected. Emily felt her breath catch, the air around them becoming dense, charged. Lucas extended his hand across the table, palm open, inviting. So, do we have a deal? Emily looked at his hand, long fingers, broad palm, a small scar near the thumb. A hand that represented everything she wasn't, everything she'd never be, and at the same time, a hand that could save her from falling. She extended her own hand, and when their skin touched, it was like completing an electrical circuit. His hand was warm, firm, and the touch lasted 1 second longer than necessary, long enough for Emily to feel his thumb gently brush the back of her hand, long enough for her to notice the way his eyes darkened a shade, long enough for the world around them to disappear. We have a deal, she whispered. And even as the words left her mouth, Emily knew this wasn't just a contract. It was the beginning of something neither of them could control. The black limousine glided through Manhattan streets like a liquid shadow, its dark windows reflecting the outside world while keeping the interior hidden. Emily sat on the soft leather seat, so soft it seemed to embrace her hands clasped in her lap, trying to control the nervous tremor that insisted on running through her fingers. The smell inside the car was an intoxicating mix of Italian leather, woody masculine cologne, and something more subtle, power. Money had a smell, she discovered, and it smelled like unshakable confidence. Lucas was beside her, maintaining a respectful distance, but still close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from his body. He was typing something on his phone, fingers moving with practiced efficiency across the screen, but Emily noticed the tension in his shoulders, the way his jaw clenched slightly with each incoming message. Nervous? His voice cut through the silence, soft but direct. Emily turned to face him. In the filtered afternoon light invading the car, his eyes seemed even more golden, like heated amber. Should I be? A smile played on his lips. Probably. My family can be intense. Intense how? Lucas put away his phone and finally turned completely toward her, his body rotating so their knees almost touched. My mother will interrogate you about everything, where you're from, what you do, your intentions with me. My Uncle George will try to impress you with business stories nobody asked to hear, and my cousin Vanessa—" He paused as if choosing his words carefully. "Shall try to figure out if you're real or not. And if she figures out I'm not, then, well, be convincing enough to make her doubt her own intuition." Lucas extended his hand and, without asking permission, took Emily's hand. The touch was so natural, so fluid that for a moment she forgot it was part of the act. "We need to practice." "Practice?" Emily's heart raced. "Practice being us." He intertwined his fingers with hers, his thumb tracing slow circles over the sensitive skin between her thumb and index finger. The gesture was intimate, almost meditative. Real couples have their own language, unconscious touches, ways of communicating without words. Emily swallowed hard, trying to ignore the electric current running up her arm. "And how exactly do we practice that?" Lucas leaned closer, and suddenly the space inside the enormous limousine felt tiny. She could see every detail of him now. The small scar above his left eyebrow, the absurdly long eyelashes, the perfect shape of his lips. "Look at me," he murmured, "like I'm the only person in the world who matters." She tried. God, she tried to make it seem artificial, rehearsed. But when her eyes met his, something changed. The air between them became dense, charged with an electricity that shouldn't exist between two people pretending. "Like that," Lucas whispered, and his voice had a different texture now, hoarser, less controlled. "Exactly like that." For an endless moment, they simply looked at each other. Emily could hear her own heart pounding in her ears, could feel Lucas' pulse racing where their fingers touched. This wasn't acting. This was something dangerously real. The car stopped smoothly, breaking the spell. "We've arrived," the driver announced through the intercom. Lucas released her hand slowly, as if reluctant, and Emily felt the loss of touch like a sudden cold. He cleared his throat, recomposing his mask of control. "Ready?" She wasn't, but she nodded anyway. The Maison de Vote salon occupied an entire floor of a building on the Upper East Side. Glass doors opened to reveal a paradise of white marble, enormous mirrors with gold frames, and the soft sound of French music floating through the air. The smell was a symphony of expensive products, essential oils, imported shampoos, something floral that Emily couldn't identify, but that certainly cost more than her monthly rent. A woman with perfectly straight platinum hair and a fitted black dress appeared instantly, her smile professional but genuinely warm. "Monsieur Sterling, what a pleasure to see you again." "Bonjour, Simone." Lucas placed his hand on Emily's back, a light touch, almost imperceptible, but one that sent waves of heat down her entire spine. "This is Emily Cooper. I need you to work your magic." Simone studied Emily with hawk eyes, but there was kindness there. "Ah, ma chérie, the magic is already here. We just need to reveal it." She extended her hand. "Come, darling. We'll make you stunning." Emily looked at Lucas, suddenly unsure. He must have noticed the hesitation because he leaned in and whispered near her ear, so close she felt his warm breath on her skin. "Trust me, and trust yourself." Then he stepped back, put his hands in his pockets, and walked to a leather armchair near the entrance, picking up a magazine as if he had all the time in the world. The next 3 hours were a blur of sensations. Skilled hands washed her hair with products that made her scalp tingle deliciously, massaging her head in a way that almost put her to sleep. She was led to a chair where a young woman with an Italian accent began working on her nails, filing, polishing, painting with a nude polish that seemed simple but was, Emily discovered, incredibly expensive. Meanwhile, another professional worked on her hair. Emily watched in the mirror as scissors danced, cutting just enough to give shape, adding layers she never knew her hair could have. Then came the hot rollers, the blow-dryer magic hands transforming her ordinary dark brown hair into soft, voluminous waves that fell over her shoulders like something out of a magazine. The makeup was the most intimate part. A woman named Claire, with incredibly delicate hands, worked on her face with an artist's precision. "Your eyes are magnificent," she murmured in heavy French. "Green like emeralds. Well, make them shine." And they shone. When Claire finally stepped back, satisfied with her work, Emily barely recognized the woman in the mirror. It wasn't that she looked different, it was that she looked more like herself, just enhanced. Her green eyes were huge, subtly lined with a smoky shadow that made them look mysterious. Her cheekbones were naturally flushed, her lips with a nude pink tone that seemed both innocent and seductive. "Ready." Simone appeared behind her, the satisfied smile of someone who knows they've created something special. Emily nodded, unable to speak. When she emerged from the treatment area into the reception, Lucas looked up from his magazine and froze. Whatever he was about to say died on his lips. He simply stood there, the forgotten magazine slipping from his hands and falling to the floor with a muffled sound, staring at her as if seeing her for the first time. Emily stopped, suddenly conscious of every inch of herself. Lucas took a step toward her, then another, until he was close enough that she could see his pupils dilate. "Emily, you're—" He paused, running a hand through his hair, and she realized he was speechless. Lucas Sterling, the man who commanded boardrooms and negotiated million-dollar contracts, was speechless. "You're absolutely stunning." The way he said it, not as a casual compliment, but as a confession pulled from him, made something tighten in Emily's chest. Lucas slowly extended his hand, as if asking silent permission. And when she didn't pull away, he gently took a strand of hair that had fallen across her face and tucked it behind her ear. His fingers lingered there, lightly tracing the line of her jaw, and Emily felt her entire body respond to the touch. "You're going to steal every gaze tonight," he murmured, his voice low and hoarse, including mine. And Emily realized with a shock that went through her like lightning that he wasn't acting. Not in that moment. "Lucas," she began, but didn't know how to finish the sentence. He blinked as if waking from a trance and stepped back slightly, composing himself. But the intensity remained in his eyes. "We should go. We still need to get your dress." "My dress?" A slow, almost mischievous smile curved his lips. "You don't think we're stopping here, do you?" The boutique was discreet on the outside, just a black door with a gold handle and a small engraved number. But inside it was another world. A minimalist, elegant space with white walls, soft lighting, and just a few carefully selected dresses on polished metal racks. A woman of about 60, gray hair pulled into an elegant bun, appeared immediately. "Lucas, mon chéri." She kissed him on both cheeks. "And this must be the lucky one. Emily. This is Madame Rousseau. She dresses all the important women in my life." "All three of them, you mean?" Madame Rousseau laughed, winking at Emily. "His mother, his sister, and now you, darling. Come. I've already selected some options." The dress Emily ended up wearing was a work of art, deep navy blue, almost black, made of silk so soft it felt like water against her skin. The neckline was elegant without being revealing. The delicate straps highlighted her shoulders, and the cut hugged her curves in a way that made her look both powerful and feminine. When she stepped out of the fitting room, Madame Rousseau simply clasped her hands over her chest, satisfied, but it was Lucas' reaction that stole the air from Emily's lungs. He was leaning against the wall, arms crossed, trying to look casual, but when he saw her, his entire body stiffened, his arms fell to his sides. He pushed off the wall and walked slowly toward her, his eyes never leaving hers. "Emily." His voice was almost reverent. She turned slightly, the dress flowing around her legs. "Does it fit?" "Fit?" Lucas let out a low, almost incredulous laugh. He stopped in front of her so close she had to tilt her head back to look at him. "You're perfect." And then he did something that caught her completely off guard. He extended his hand, not to touch her face or her hair, but to hold her hand. He intertwined his fingers with hers and gently pulled her closer. "I need to tell you something," he murmured, low enough that only she could hear. "What?" "I'm not pretending anymore." Emily's heart stopped. "Lucas, I know I should be. I know that's the deal. But when I look at you—" He shook his head, a frustrated smile touching his lips. "When I look at you, I forget this is a contract." Emily couldn't breathe. "We barely know each other." "I know." He brought her hand to his lips and pressed a soft kiss to her knuckles, his eyes never leaving hers. "But I know this." He pressed her hand against his chest, over his heart. Beneath her palm, Emily could feel his heart beating strong, fast, uncontrolled. "And this doesn't lie." What if we're making a mistake? Emily whispered. What if we're not? The question hung in the air between them, heavy with possibility. Madame Rousseau discreetly disappeared, giving them privacy. In the boutique's silence, with only the sound of their intertwined breaths, Emily felt something inside her surrender. She raised her free hand and touched his face, her fingers tracing the line of his jaw. Lucas closed his eyes at the touch as if savoring every second. Tonight, she said softly, we'll go to the wedding. We'll pretend. And after, we'll talk about what's real and what isn't. He opened his eyes, and there was an intensity in them that made her tremble. Deal. But when he leaned in and pressed his forehead against hers, Emily knew the truth. They'd already crossed the line between pretending and feeling, and there was no going back. The mansion in the Hamptons rose against the evening sky like a palace from a fairy tale, but not the gentle kind, rather those with touches of mystery and secrets hidden behind golden doors. The light stone structure gleamed under strategically positioned lights in meticulously trimmed gardens, where marble fountains gushed crystal water and the perfume of white roses filled the falling night air. The distant sound of the ocean mixed with the soft music of a string quartet playing on the main veranda. Emily held Lucas' arm tighter than she intended as they stepped out of the limousine. Her legs trembled slightly inside the high-heeled Louboutins Madame Rousseau had insisted on, and each step on the stone path seemed like a challenge to gravity. But it wasn't just the heels making her unsteady. It was the magnitude of it all, the dozens of luxury cars parked in a row, the discreet but clearly armed security guards, the crystalline laughter of women wearing jewelry that probably cost more than her entire life. Breathe, Lucas murmured near her ear, his hand covering hers on his arm. The touch was firm, comforting. You belong here as much as any of them. We both know that's not true, she whispered back, trying to smile as they passed an elderly couple watching them with poorly disguised curiosity. You're with me. That puts you above all of them. He said it with such conviction that Emily almost believed it. The mansion's interior was even more impressive. An immense crystal chandelier hung from the high ceiling of the entrance hall, refracting light into 1,000 rainbows dancing across walls lined with silk wallpaper. The Italian marble floor reflected images like a polished mirror. Waiters circulated silently with trays of champagne and canapes that looked like small works of art. Lucas. Finally. A shrill female voice cut through the party's buzz. Emily turned to see a woman approaching, or rather gliding. She was everything Emily wasn't. Tall, platinum blonde, wearing a red dress that probably cost more than a car, and a smile that didn't reach her eyes. But it was the way she looked at Lucas with a possessive, intimate familiarity that made something uncomfortable turn in Emily's stomach. "Vanessa," Lucas greeted, his voice polite but distinctly cold. "You look radiant as always. Not as much as your mysterious companion." Vanessa's ice-blue eyes slid over Emily with the subtlety of a surgical scalpel, dissecting every detail. "You must be the Emily that absolutely nobody has ever heard of." Emily felt Lucas' arm tense under her fingers, but before he could respond, she smiled the kind of smile she'd learned to use when difficult clients questioned her work. "Guilty. I prefer to keep a low profile, unlike some people." Vanessa blinked, surprised by the sharp response, but then laughed, a laugh that sounded genuine despite the ice in her eyes. "Ah, she has teeth. Interesting." She turned to Lucas. "Your mother is looking for you." "Something about official photos." "Of course she is." Lucas sighed, then looked at Emily, ready to meet the lioness in her den. Emily wasn't, but she nodded anyway. Catherine Sterling was exactly what Emily imagined a billionaire matriarch would be, elegant, imposing, with a posture that suggested generations of refined upbringing. She wore a champagne-colored silk dress that was probably vintage Chanel, pearls at her neck and wrists, and her graying hair pulled into a sophisticated updo that highlighted her sharp bone structure. But it was her eyes, steel gray, penetrating, missing nothing that made Emily feel completely exposed. "Mother," Lucas said, his hand still firm on Emily's back. "This is Emily Cooper. Emily, my mother, Catherine Sterling." "Mrs. Sterling, it's a pleasure." Emily extended her hand, grateful she wasn't visibly shaking. Catherine accepted the handshake, brief, firm, evaluative. Emily, what a charmingly simple name. It wasn't exactly an insult, but it wasn't a compliment either. Lucas mentioned very little about you, which is intriguing considering my son is usually meticulously detailed about his life. Some things are too special to be shared immediately. Lucas intervened gently, but there was steel in his voice. Catherine arched a perfectly drawn eyebrow. She studied Emily with the intensity of someone evaluating an investment. You work, dear? Yes. I'm a graphic designer. Ah. The sound revealed nothing. Freelance. Yes. How modern. Catherine took a delicate sip of her champagne. And tell me, Emily, how did you and my son meet? I imagine it wasn't at one of our usual events. Emily felt the trap closing. Every word she said would be weighed, measured, used to form an image of her. She was about to respond when she felt Lucas' hand slide from her back to her waist, pulling her slightly closer, a protective, intimate gesture. We met through a mutual friend, Lucas said, the lie flowing smoothly. I saw her work, was impressed. I invited her for coffee, and... He looked at Emily, and there was something so genuine in his eyes that she almost forgot they were lying. I immediately realized there was something special about her. Catherine observed her son, then Emily, then her son again. For an endless moment, Emily was certain the woman knew that she saw through the charade. But then Catherine smiled small, almost imperceptible, but a smile nonetheless. Well, my son has always had good taste, even when questionable. She paused. We'll be taking family photos soon. You'll join us. Of course, it wasn't an invitation. It was a command. It would be an honor, Emily replied. Because what else could she say? When Catherine glided away through the crowd with the grace of a queen, Emily finally allowed herself to exhale. She hates me. She doesn't hate you, Lucas corrected, guiding her toward the terrace where the reception was happening. She's evaluating you. It's different. Doesn't feel different. Lucas stopped, turning to face her completely. The music and voices around them created a sound bubble that isolated them. Emily, look at me. When she obeyed, he gently held her face between his hands. You're doing perfectly, better than perfect. You're more than enough. But before she could finish, someone tapped a glass with something metallic. The sharp sound cut through the party. All conversations gradually ceased. Attention. Attention. Everyone. It was Matthew, Lucas' cousin, standing in the center of the terrace with a microphone. He was radiant, his arm around his fiancée, both glowing with the happiness of people about to get married. Thank you all for coming to celebrate with us on this special night. Polite applause. Emily felt Lucas tense beside her. But before we dine, I believe my dear cousin Lucas has something he'd like to share with all of us. Matthew extended the microphone toward them, his smile wide, expectant. Emily felt her blood freeze. This wasn't in the plan. She looked at Lucas and saw momentary panic across his face before being replaced by determination. No, she whispered. Lucas, don't. But he was already moving, his hand intertwined with hers, guiding her through the crowd that parted like the Red Sea. All heads turned, all eyes fixed on them. Emily felt every beat of her heart like a drum in her ears, every step like walking toward a cliff. Lucas took the microphone. For a moment, he just stood there looking at her, and Emily saw 1,000 emotions cross those golden eyes. Fear, hope, something deeper she couldn't name. Matthew's right, Lucas began, his amplified voice reverberating through the night. I do have something I'd like to share. Lucas. Emily whispered again, but her voice was swallowed by the expectant silence. And then, before 200 people, beneath the crystal chandelier and the stars beginning to appear in the sky, Lucas Sterling knelt. The world seemed to stop. Emily heard the collective gasps, the muffled exclamations, someone saying, "Oh my God," in the distance. But all of that was distant, unreal, because all she could see was Lucas kneeling before her, looking up with an intensity that went through her like lightning. "Emily Cooper," he began, and his voice, God, his voice was trembling. This wasn't acting. It couldn't be. From the moment you walked into that cafe with your defiant green eyes and your honest heart, I knew you were different from anyone I'd ever met." Emily's hands began to tremble. "What are you doing?" she whispered. But he continued, "You make me want to be better. You make me laugh when I forgot how. You see through all the walls I've built and accept me anyway." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. When he opened it, a diamond caught the light and exploded into a million sparks. "Marry me. Not because I should, not because it makes sense, but because I can't imagine a single day of my future without you in it." The silence was absolute. 200 people held their breath. Emily looked at the ring, real, incredibly expensive, absolutely stunning. Then she looked at Lucas and saw something in his eyes that terrified her. Truth. This wasn't part of the plan. This wasn't in the contract. This was something completely out of control. "Lucas," she began, her voice wavering. "Trust me," he whispered, too low for the microphone to catch. "Please, trust me." And Emily realized she was at a crossroads. She could refuse, expose him, humiliate him in front of everyone, destroy whatever was building between them, or she could take a leap of faith into something she didn't understand, into something that scared her because it felt dangerously real. She extended her hand, trembling. Yes. The word had barely left her lips when the crowd exploded applause, screams, whistles, but Emily didn't hear any of it. She only saw Lucas slide the ring onto her finger, heavy, warm, undeniably real, before standing and pulling her into his arms. He held her so tight she could barely breathe, his face buried in her neck. "I'm sorry," he murmured against her skin, his voice rough. "I'm sorry. I couldn't not do this." "You're crazy," she whispered back, but her arms wrapped around him just as tightly. When they finally separated, Catherine Sterling was there, an indecipherable expression on her face. She looked at Emily, then at her son, and then did something surprising. She smiled. Truly smiled. "Welcome to the family, Emily." And Emily felt the ground disappear beneath her feet. Later, when the party had moved inside and couples were dancing on the improvised dance floor, Lucas guided her to a quiet corner of the garden. The mansion's lights shone in the distance, but there, under a pergola covered with jasmine, they were alone. "Explain," Emily said, her voice calmer than she felt. "Explain what just happened." Lucas ran his hands over his face, clearly exhausted. "Matthew set me up. He knew that if he put me in the spotlight, I couldn't just back down. And I thought if we're going to pretend, let's do something big enough that nobody questions it. So it was just acting." She didn't know why the idea hurt so much. "No." He took a step toward her, his eyes seeking hers in the dimness. The words were real. "The ring is real. The only pretense was the timeline. Lucas, I know this is crazy. I know we met less than a week ago, but, Emily." He took her hand, his thumb tracing the ring on her finger. "When I look at you, I don't see a contract. I see a possibility. I see something I never knew I was looking for." Emily pulled her hand away, needing space to think. "And what happens when the 6 months are up? When I'm supposed to get my payment and disappear from your life? What if you didn't disappear?" "You can't ask that of me," her voice broke. "You can't ask me to risk my heart on something that started as a lie." "Then let me prove it," Lucas said urgently. "Let me prove this is more than a lie, that it can be something real." Emily looked at him, at the man who a week ago was a stranger and now was someone who made her heart race with a simple look. "How?" "Stay with me," he whispered, taking another step closer. "Not for 6 months, just one more day, then another. And we'll figure out together where this leads us. What if it leads us straight to disaster? Then at least we'll have tried." Emily closed her eyes, feeling tears burn. When she opened them again, Lucas was there, waiting, vulnerable in a way she never imagined a man like him could be. "One day at a time," she finally said. "One day at a time," he repeated, and when he pulled her into his arms again, Emily rested her head on his chest and whispered against his shirt, "Nothing gets canceled tonight." Lucas laughed a low, relieved sound. "Nothing gets canceled tonight," he echoed. But they both knew the truth. They'd just signed a contract, far more complicated than any piece of paper, a contract written in hope, fear, and the terrifying possibility of love. The next morning arrived with a particular cruelty. Sunlight invaded the hotel room where Emily had slept, or rather, where Shed spent the night staring at the ceiling, the diamond ring weighing on her finger like a glittering accusation. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the moment. Lucas, kneeling, 200 people watching, the word yes escaping her lips before she could think about the consequences. The smell of fresh coffee pulled her from bed. She dragged herself to the suite's living room because of course Lucas had reserved a suite, not just a room, and found him there standing by the panoramic window that offered a stunning view of the ocean. He was dressed casually, dark jeans, white shirt with sleeves rolled up to his elbows, revealing muscular forearms that Emily forced herself not to admire. His hair was slightly tousled, as if He'd run his hands through it several times. He turned when he heard her enter, and something passed across his face. Relief, nervousness. Good morning? Coffee? Answers first. Coffee after. Emily crossed her arms, conscious that she was wearing only the oversized t-shirt Shed borrowed from the emergency bag Lucas had mysteriously provided. I need you to explain to me exactly what happened last night. Lucas nodded as if expecting this. He moved to the couch and sat, gesturing for her to do the same. When Emily remained standing, he sighed. My mother called me this morning at 6 a.m. And she's enthusiastic. He said the word as if it was something dangerous. She wants to start planning the wedding immediately. She's talking about June in the Summer Estates garden. She's mentioning guest lists that include diplomats and CEOs. Emily's stomach churned. Lucas, wait. He raised his hand. There's more. She also mentioned that if I'm truly committed to getting married, and those were her words, not mine, then she's prepared to transfer control of certain company divisions to me. Divisions I've been trying to take over for years. Emily began to understand. She's testing you. She's testing us. Lucas leaned forward, elbows on his knees. Catherine Sterling didn't get where she is by being naive. She suspects something. I don't know what exactly, but she suspects. And now, he looked directly at Emily. Now she's raising the stakes to see if we're real. So what are you saying? Emily's voice came out harsher than intended. That now we have to pretend until June? Plan a fake wedding? Not until June. Lucas stood, approaching her carefully, as if she were a frightened animal about to flee. 6 months. Just 6 months of engagement, long enough to convince my mother, my family, everyone. And then? He paused. We can find a way to end it discreetly. Incompatibility, irreconcilable differences, something that doesn't raise suspicions. 6 months, Emily repeated, testing the weight of the words. Of lies, of pretending. Of protection, Lucas corrected gently. Emily, my mother will investigate you. Shell's probably already started. And when she discovers your debts, your financial situation. He hesitated, clearly choosing his words carefully. Shell offer you money to leave. Emily's blood ran cold. What? It's what she does. It's how she protects the family. Shell offer you a significant amount to disappear from my life, to prove you were in this for the money all along. But I am in this for the money, Emily whispered, the truth bitter on her tongue. Lucas took another step, now close enough that she could feel his warmth. No, you were in this for the money. Past tense. But last night when you said yes, when you looked at me that way, his voice grew lower, hoarser. That wasn't about money. Emily wanted to argue, wanted to say he was wrong, that he was seeing things that didn't exist. But the words died in her throat because deep down she knew he was right. How much? She finally asked, forcing practicality into her voice. How much are you proposing for these 6 months? Lucas stepped back slightly, and she saw something close in his face. Disappointment, hurt. But he quickly recomposed his mask. $1,500,000 now. $500,000 when we're done. The number stole the air from Emily's lungs. 1 million. She could pay off all her debts, start over, have stability for the first time in years. And what exactly does that million buy? She forced herself to ask, to keep the conversation in the safe territory of transactions. Lucas walked to the coffee table and picked up a leather folder. He opened it and removed several documents. Updated contract already reviewed by my lawyers this morning. Of course it was. The terms are as follows. You move into my property. Wait, what? To the guest house, he clarified. Not into my main house. You'll have complete privacy, but we need to live close to maintain appearances. My mother expects it. Emily felt the walls closing in. Continue. Attendance at family and social events is needed probably 2 to 3 times a week. Dinners, galas, occasionally weekend trips. He paused, his eyes meeting hers. In public, we need to be a convincing couple, which means touching, Emily completed, her voice sounding distant even to her own ears. Yes, holding hands, hugs, kisses when appropriate. He said this clinically, professionally, but there was something in his eyes that betrayed his composure, but only in public. When we're alone, you have complete control. No obligations, no expectations. And if I refuse? Lucas closed the folder slowly. Then you get the original $50,000 as promised, and we never see each other again. He met her gaze. But Emily, my mother will find you anyway. She'll investigate. And when she discovers the truth about last night. He left the sentence hanging, the implicit threat clear. Emily walked to the window, needing space, air, a perspective that wasn't his face with that vulnerable expression that made her heart squeeze inconveniently. Below, the ocean stretched infinite waves hitting the shore with hypnotic regularity. Simple, predictable everything her life wasn't at that moment. I need rules, she said finally without turning. Rules? If we're going to do this, I need clear boundaries. She took a deep breath, gathering courage. Rule number 1. Public touching is allowed and expected. We need to be convincing. Agreed. Rule number 2. Kisses, if absolutely necessary, are allowed, but only when there's an audience. There was a pause. Understood. Rule number 3. Nothing more intimate than that. We sleep in separate houses. We live separate lives when we're not performing. Emily, rule number 4, she continued, her voice firmer now. Truth between us always. When we're alone, without the masks, without the pretense, we're honest with each other. No games. She finally turned to face him. Lucas was standing in the middle of the room, hands in his pockets, and there was something so lonely in that posture that Emily felt her chest tighten. And the last rule, she said softer now, when the 6 months are over, we're over. Clean. No resentment, no drama. We just end. Lucas watched her for a long moment, then slowly nodded. Your rules, your terms. He approached, stopping a meter away, respecting the space shed created. But can I add one rule of my own? What? If at any point you want out for any reason, you can. No penalties, no consequences. You keep what you've already received and walk away. He tilted his head. Your freedom is non-negotiable. Emily didn't expect that. Didn't expect the generosity, the consideration. This would be easier if he were the arrogant billionaire of stereotypes, but Lucas Sterling kept surprising her, showing layers of humanity that shouldn't exist in someone from his world. Why are you doing this? She asked softly. The truth, Lucas. Why not just find someone from your world? Someone who already knows the rules, who already plays the game. Lucas took another step and another until he was close enough that Emily could see the small lines around his eyes, the shadow of stubble beginning to appear, the way his jaw clenched when he was thinking deeply. Because someone from my world would want something from me, power, connections, status. He raised his hand slowly, giving her time to pull back. But she didn't. His fingers lightly touched her face, tracing the line of her cheek. You just want to survive. It's honest. And there's something about you, Emily Cooper, that makes me want to be honest too. His touch was so gentle, so unexpectedly tender that Emily felt tears burn her eyes. What if 6 months isn't enough? She whispered. What if your mother isn't convinced? Then we improvise. His hand moved, fingers threading through her hair. But I can promise you one thing. I'll protect you from my mother, from my world, from anything that tries to hurt you. That I can promise." Lucas. She didn't know what she was about to say, didn't know if it was a warning, a request, or a surrender. But then her phone rang, shrill and intrusive, breaking the moment. Lucas stepped back immediately, clearing his throat, the mask of control sliding back into place. Emily grabbed her phone with trembling hands. It was an unknown number. She answered, "Hello?" "Miss Cooper." The voice was female, polite, efficient. "My name is Patricia, assistant to Mrs. Catherine Sterling. The lady would like to invite you to lunch today, one at the plaza. She said, you have much to discuss." Emily met Lucas' gaze. Head heard. She could tell by the way his body stiffened, how his eyes narrowed. "Tell Mrs. Sterling." "It will be a pleasure," Emily replied, surprising herself with the firmness in her voice. When she hung up, Lucas was beside her. "You don't have to go. I can call her." "Cancel." "No." Emily straightened her shoulders, feeling something strengthen inside her. "If we're doing this, we do it right. Your mother wants to meet me. Fine. I'll meet her." "Emily, you said you'd protect me." She met his eyes. "So trust that I can protect myself too." A slow, admiring smile curved his lips. "You're stronger than you think." "I'm learning to be." Lucas extended his hand, formal, almost ceremonious. "So, do we have a deal? 6 months, 1 million, your rules?" Emily looked at the extended hand. A week ago she was a freelance designer on the verge of eviction. Now she was about to sign a $1 million contract to pretend to be a billionaire's fiancée. Life, she realized, had a peculiar sense of humor. She placed her hand in his. "We have a deal." The handshake was firm, professional, but when Lucas turned her hand and pressed a soft kiss to the center of her palm, his eyes never leaving hers, Emily knew the rules they'd just established would be tested in ways neither of them was prepared for. "Welcome to the Sterling family," he murmured against her skin. And Emily thought, God help me. What have I just done? The guest house on the Sterling property was larger than any apartment Emily had ever lived in. 2 bedrooms, a spacious living room with high ceilings and exposed wooden beams, a modern kitchen gleaming with stainless steel appliances she barely knew how to use, and a balcony overlooking meticulously maintained gardens that seemed to stretch to infinity. The smell was of polished wood, fresh flowers, an arrangement of white peonies rested on the coffee table, and something more indefinable, privilege. Emily dropped her single suitcase on the floor of the master bedroom, looking around with a mixture of admiration and discomfort. The walls were creamy white, the king-size bed covered with sheets that probably had a thread count higher than her previous monthly salary. A large window offered a view of the main mansion just 50 meters away, close enough to maintain appearances, far enough to preserve the illusion of privacy. "Do you like it?" Lucas' voice made her turn. He was leaning against the doorframe, watching her with an expression she still couldn't completely decipher. "It's beautiful." Emily ran her fingers over the soft fabric of an armchair near the window. "It feels wrong that it's just mine." "It's temporarily yours," he corrected, but there was something gentle in the correction. "And before you ask, yes, the cleaning staff comes twice a week. The kitchen is stocked daily. There's a car at your disposal in the garage, the black Tesla." "Lucas, I can't drive a Tesla." "You can and will." He entered the room, hands in his dress pants, pockets. Head come directly from the office, dark gray suit, navy blue tie perfectly aligned, hair combed back in a way that made him look even more imposing. "This is part of the deal. You need to move freely without depending on drivers or explanations." Emily nodded, still processing the magnitude of the change in her life. 3 days ago, she was struggling to pay rent. Now she had access to a Tesla and a cleaning staff. "Dinner is at 8, Lucas continued, checking his watch, a Patek Philippe that probably cost more than a house. "At the main mansion. My mother insists on family dinners every Tuesday and Thursday. It's a tradition. I'll be there." Emily tried to sound confident, but her voice betrayed a nervous tremor. Lucas studied her for a moment, then approached slowly, deliberately, stopping only when he was close enough that Emily had to tilt her head back to look at him. "You'll do fine," he said, and then did something unexpected. He raised his hand and brushed away a strand of hair that had fallen across her face, his fingers lingering slightly at her temple. "You're stronger than you imagine." The touch sent shivers across Emily's skin. "Lucas, we're alone," she reminded him, her voice coming out huskier than intended. "No audience." "I know." But he didn't pull his hand away. Instead, his fingers traced the line of her jaw so softly it was almost a whisper of a touch. Sometimes I forget where the acting ends and the truth begins. Emily should step back, should remember the rules she herself had established, but she was paralyzed by the intensity in his eyes, by the way her entire body responded to his proximity. "Lucas." Her voice was a warning or an invitation. She didn't know anymore. He seemed to wake from a trance, blinked, let his hand drop, and stepped back. "I'm sorry. I crossed boundaries." "Yes." Emily wrapped her arms around herself, suddenly cold in the absence of his warmth. "You did. It won't happen again." But the way he looked at her with barely disguised desire, with something deeper that frightened them both, said it was a promise he wasn't sure he could keep. After he left, Emily sat on the edge of the bed, her heart racing, hands trembling. 6 months. How would she survive 6 months like this? Dinner at the main mansion was an elaborate production. The dining room could easily accommodate 20 people, but that evening there were only 5. Catherine at the head, Lucas beside Emily, and 2 other family members. Emily was introduced to Uncle George, a corpulent man with a graying mustache and loud laugh, and Vanessa, who looked at Emily with the same sharp curiosity of a cat watching a wounded bird. The table was set with porcelain that was probably family heirloom, crystal glasses that captured and refracted light from the candelabras, and silver flatware that Emily was afraid of using incorrectly. The smell of gourmet food, roasted lamb with herbs, grilled asparagus, something with truffle she couldn't identify, filled the air. "Emily, dear." Catherine began as soon as everyone sat down, her voice polite but loaded with predatory curiosity. "Tell us about your family." Lucas mentioned very little. Emily felt Lucas' hand move under the table, finding hers on her lap. He intertwined their fingers, squeezed gently, a gesture of support. "You can do this," the touch said. "My parents died when I was 16, Emily began, forcing stability into her voice. "Car accident. I was raised by my grandmother until she passed when I was 22. Since then, it's been just me." The silence that followed was heavy. Catherine placed her fork delicately on her plate. "My condolences, dear. That must have been difficult." "It was." Emily met the older woman's eyes. "But it taught me to be resilient, to value the things that really matter." "And what matters to you?" Vanessa asked, her voice sweet but with a sharp edge. "Besides my cousin, of course." Emily felt the trap but didn't back down. Honesty, loyalty, the ability to see people for who they really are, not what they own. She paused, letting the words settle. "Money comes and goes. Character remains." Uncle George let out a loud laugh. "Well said. Lucas, you found one with a spine, not like those substanceless socialites you used to bring around." "George," Catherine warned. But there was a gleam of something approval in her eyes when she looked at Emily. The rest of dinner passed in a blur of business conversations Emily barely understood, politics she tried to follow, and occasional questions directed at her that felt like mini interrogations disguised as courtesy. But through it all, Lucas' hand remained in hers under the table, hidden from view, but constantly present. Sometimes he traced circles with his thumb on her palm, other times he just held it firm and comforting. And Emily realized with a shock that went through her like electric current that she didn't want him to let go. After dinner, Lucas walked her back to the guest house. The night was cool, the air perfumed with the smell of freshly cut grass and jasmine from the gardens. Their shadows stretched long under the lights from the posts, illuminating the stone path. "You were incredible in there," Lucas said, his hands in his pockets, maintaining a respectful distance as they walked side by side. "I felt like I was being dissected." "Welcome to Sterling family dinners." He smiled, but there was weariness in it. "My mother does this to everyone. It's how she assesses threats." "And am I a threat?" Lucas stopped walking, turning to face her under the soft light of a post. "You're the biggest threat she's ever faced. Why? Because she can't buy you. Can't control you." He took a step closer and Emily felt her heart race. "And because I really care about you, she can sense it. And that terrifies her. Lucas, we established rules, I know." Another step. Now he was close enough that she could see every detail of his face, the tense jaw, eyes darkened by desire. He was trying to control the way he breathed, irregular and shallow. "I know the rules. I know that when we're alone, this should stop. But, Emily," his voice grew hoarse, "I can't stop thinking about you." "No." Emily stepped back, needing space, air, clarity she couldn't find when he was so close. "We can't do this. The rules exist for a reason. What if I didn't care about the rules?" He didn't advance, respecting the space shed created, but the intensity didn't diminish. "What if I told you that every moment away from you feels wrong? That when I held your hand during dinner, I wasn't acting?" "Stop." Her voice broke. "Please stop." "Why?" "Because it's scary. Because it doesn't make sense." Lucas ran his hands through his hair, frustration evident in every line of his body. "Well, welcome to my world, because I'm terrified, and I don't understand any of this either. You hired me," Emily said, forcing the words despite the pain in her chest. "This started as a transaction, $50,000, now $1 million for me to pretend to be your fiancé. We can't just forget that." "I'm not forgetting anything." He took a step toward her again, slow, cautious. "I'm just saying that maybe it's become something more, something neither of us planned. What if we're confusing forced intimacy with real feelings?" Emily asked desperately. "What if, when the 6 months are over, we realize it was just proximity, convenience? Then we'll figure that out together." Lucas extended his hand not to touch her, but simply offering. "But Emily, can I ask you something?" "What?" "When I touch you, when I hold your hand, when I look at you?" He paused, vulnerable in a way that broke her heart. "Or am I the only one losing my mind?" Emily closed her eyes, trying to build walls that kept crumbling. "I feel it," she admitted in a whisper. "I feel everything, and that's why I need you to step back. Because if you don't, I'll forget why I'm here. I'll forget this has an expiration date, and when it ends." She opened her eyes, tears threatening to overflow. "It will destroy me." The expression on Lucas' face changed. The frustration, the desire, everything dissolved into something softer, more tender. "I would never intentionally hurt you," he said softly. "I know. But sometimes the worst wounds aren't intentional." Lucas nodded slowly, finally understanding what she was saying. "Then I'll step back. I respect the rules." He took a step back, then another. "But Emily, when you're ready, if you're ever ready to consider that this might be more than pretending, I'll be here." He turned to leave, but Emily called out. "Lucas." He stopped, looking over his shoulder. "Thank you for respecting the boundaries, even when it's hard." A sad smile touched his lips. "Always." And then he left, disappearing into the darkness toward the main mansion. Emily entered the guest house, closed the door, and finally allowed the tears to fall. Because the truth, the terrifying truth she couldn't admit out loud, was that she was already falling in love with him, and there was no rule in the world that could protect her from that. The days that followed established a dangerous rhythm. In the mornings, Emily worked on freelance projects. Shed resumed now with the financial freedom to choose only clients that truly interested her. In the afternoons, she sometimes met Lucas for lunch, or he'd show up at the guest house with transparent excuses about documents she needed to sign or events they needed to discuss. But it was the evenings that tested her resolve. Family dinners became elaborate rituals of performance. Lucas would pull out her chair, place his hand on her back when entering the room, lean in to whisper something in her ear sometimes about the conversation happening around them, sometimes just, "You look beautiful tonight," and each whisper sent waves of heat down her entire spine. One evening, during a particularly tense dinner where Vanessa was being especially difficult asking pointed questions about their whirlwind relationship, Lucas did something that stopped Emily's heart. He took her hand on the table, not underneath, hidden, but on top in full view, and intertwined his fingers with hers. Then he brought her hand to his lips and pressed a soft, prolonged kiss to her knuckles, his eyes never leaving hers. "Some things don't need time to be real," he said. But he was answering Vanessa while looking at Emily. "You just know." Emily felt all the air leave her lungs. Was this acting? It had to be. They had an audience. But the way he looked at her, the tenderness in the touch, the raw emotion in his eyes. That night when he walked her back, they walked in silence. But it was a loaded silence, heavy with unspoken things. When they reached the guest house door, Emily turned to face him. "This is getting harder," she admitted. "I know. I don't know anymore where the acting ends." "Neither do I." Lucas raised his hand, hesitated, giving her time to pull back, and when she didn't, he touched her face just a touch, his palm against her cheek. "But I know that when I'm with you, I feel more like myself than at any moment in my life." Emily closed her eyes, leaning into the touch despite all the rational voices screaming not to. "Lucas, this is going to hurt us." "Probably." He pressed his forehead against hers, and they stayed like that, breaths mingling, hearts beating out of sync. "But maybe it's worth it." And there, under the stars and away from curious eyes, without an audience and no reason to pretend, Lucas Sterling held Emily Cooper as if she were the most precious thing in the world. And Emily, despite all her fear, all her rules, held him back. The following weeks transformed Emily from a nervous observer into a reluctant participant in the Sterling world. Events followed one another with a frequency that left her dizzy. Charity galas in museums illuminated by crystal chandeliers, intimate dinners with only 30 guests at Michelin-starred restaurants, art auctions where people bid millions with the same casualness Emily used to order coffee. But it was at the Sterling Foundation's annual ball that Emily truly understood the magnitude of the world she'd infiltrated. The Plaza Hotel's ballroom had been transformed into a modern fairy tale. White flowers, roses, lilies, orchids, cascaded from arrangements suspended from the ceiling, creating the illusion of a celestial garden. Floating candles, Emily learned later they were held by invisible threads, so thin they seemed like magic, cast a soft golden light over everything. The tables were covered with white linen tablecloths and decorated with gold china, crystal glasses that reflected light like small prisms, and more flowers than Emily had seen in her entire life. The smell was intoxicating, expensive perfumes mixing with the scent of flowers, French champagne, and something more subtle, ambition. Power had a perfume, Emily learned, and it smelled like unshakable confidence and old money. She was wearing a dress that Madame Rousseau had insisted was perfect for the occasion, deep emerald green that matched her eyes exactly, an elegant but not daring V neckline, flowing silk fabric that moved like water around her body. Her hair was pulled into a low, sophisticated bun, loose strands framing her face, and the jewelry borrowed from a Sterling family collection, Lucas had explained was simple but stunning. Diamond earrings, and a delicate bracelet that probably cost more than a car. Nervous? Lucas appeared beside her, devastatingly elegant in a perfectly tailored black tuxedo, bow tie that highlighted the strong line of his jaw, hair combed back so his golden eyes were even more prominent. Terrified, Emily admitted, accepting the champagne glass he offered. Their fingers touched in the transfer, and that familiar spark that never diminished, no matter how many times it happened, ran up her arm. "You look stunning." It wasn't the first time Head said it, but the way he looked at her as if he couldn't believe she was real, as if he wanted to memorize every detail, made the phrase feel new every time. "You're not bad yourself." Emily allowed herself a moment to openly admire him. And God, he was handsome. But it wasn't just the physical appearance. It was the way he moved with quiet confidence, how his eyes searched for hers in rooms full of people, how he touched her, always gentle, always respectful, always loaded with an unspoken promise. "I need to warn you about some people here tonight," Lucas said, lowering his voice as he led her through the crowd. His hand rested on her back, that proprietary but protective touch she'd grown accustomed to. Richard Blackwell, he's one of Sterling Core main competitors. Hell, try to probe you about our business. I don't know anything about your business. Exactly. But he doesn't know that. So when he asks, and he will ask, just smile and change the subject. They stopped near one of the monumental floral arrangements. Lucas turned to face her completely, and there was seriousness in his eyes now. And there's Senator Morrison. She's considering supporting legislation that would affect our international operations. My mother will want us to make a good impression. No pressure then. Emily took a sip of champagne, appreciating how the bubbles burst delicately on her tongue. Emily. Lucas took her free hand, intertwining their fingers. You don't need to impress anyone. Just be yourself. That's always worked so far. Before she could respond, a voice cut through the air. Lucas. Darling, and this must be the famous Emily. They turned to find a woman of about 50, perfectly styled blonde hair, navy blue dress covered in sequins that caught the light with every movement. But it was her eyes, sharp, calculating, missing no detail, that made Emily straighten her posture. Senator Morrison, Lucas greeted, political charm sliding into place like a second skin. What a pleasure to see you. This is Emily Cooper, my fiancée. The word still sent a shock through Emily every time she heard it. Fiancé delighted, dear. The senator extended her hand, the grip firm and prolonged. I heard you came from humble beginnings. What an inspiring story. There was poison wrapped in silk there. Emily recognized the attack disguised as a compliment. I learned that character doesn't come from where we're born, Senator, but from the choices we make. I imagine that in your line of work you see that often. The senator's eyes sparkled. Respect or irritation? Emily wasn't sure. Touché, my dear. Lucas, you chose well. She has a spine. After the senator moved away, Lucas leaned in and whispered near Emily's ear. That was perfect. She respects you now. I feel like I passed a test I didn't know I was taking. Welcome to high society. Everything is a test. His breath against her neck sent shivers down her spine. But you're passing all of them. The evening unfolded in a series of introductions, superficial conversations that demanded full attention, and smiles that made Emily's facial muscles ache. But through it all, Lucas was there, a constant, comforting presence. His hand at the small of her back as they navigated the crowd, his fingers intertwined with hers when they posed for photos. The way he leaned in to whisper explanations about who was who mattered, and who just pretended to matter. And then Catherine Sterling took the stage. The family matriarch commanded attention effortlessly. Dressed in silver that looked liquid, she positioned herself at the microphone and waited. Silence fell over the ballroom like a curtain. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for being here to support the Sterling Foundation. Polite applause. Tonight is special not only for the 20 million we've raised for charity, more applause, but because I have a personal joy to share. Emily felt Lucas tense beside her. This wasn't planned. My son Lucas and his beautiful fiancée Emily are with us tonight. All eyes turned. Emily felt the weight of hundreds of gazes, some curious, others critical, many frankly envious. And I'd like to invite the young couple to join us for a dance. After all, we'll soon be celebrating a wedding. It wasn't an invitation. It was a public command. Lucas squeezed Emily's hand. Breathe, he murmured. I'll lead you. They walked to the dance floor in the center of the ballroom, and Emily was conscious of every step, every gaze, every whisper. The orchestra began to play something classical, romantic, a waltz in three-quarter time that Emily didn't recognize, but that sounded like something from an old fairy tale. Lucas pulled her into his arms, one hand at her waist, the other holding hers, positioned perfectly. He began to lead, and Emily found herself following their bodies, moving in perfect sync as if they'd danced together for years. Look at me, he instructed softly. Forget everyone else. It's just the two of us. Emily raised her eyes and lost herself in his golden under the lights, deep, intense. And suddenly, the ballroom, full of people, disappeared. It was just her and Lucas turning slowly, bodies so close she could feel his warmth through the thin fabric of her dress. You dance well, she whispered. Mandatory lessons at 7. Hated every second. His smile was intimate, meant only for her. But I'm grateful now. Why? Because it gives me an excuse to hold you like this." His hand at her waist moved slightly, pressing her closer, and Emily felt her entire body respond. "To have you in my arms in front of everyone, and nobody questions it." "Lucas." It was a warning or a plea. She didn't know anymore. The music changed, becoming slower, softer. Other couples joined the dance floor, but Emily barely noticed. Lucas pulled her even closer, so close their bodies were pressed together, moving as one. She could feel his heart beating against her chest, fast and strong. Could feel his breath in her hair, warm and irregular. "Can I tell you a secret?" he murmured against the top of her head. "What?" "I'm not pretending anymore. Not here. Not with you in my arms." He tilted his head, his lips lightly brushing her temple. "I don't know when I stopped pretending, Emily. I just know it happened." Emily's heart raced uncontrollably. "There are hundreds of people watching us. I don't care. Your mother is watching us. Let her watch." Lucas pulled back just enough to look into her eyes. "Let everyone see that I'm completely, irrevocably in love with you." The world stopped. The music continued, but Emily couldn't hear it anymore. Couldn't hear anything but the blood pounding in her ears. Couldn't feel anything but the weight of those words. "You can't say that," she whispered, desperate. "Why not?" "Because it changes everything. Because," her voice broke, "because if you say it, I'll believe it. And when the 6 months are over, when this ends, it will destroy me." Lucas stopped dancing. There, in the middle of the floor, surrounded by hundreds of people, he took her face between his hands. "What if it doesn't end? What if we find a way?" "There is no way, Lucas. We live in different worlds. Then I'll come to your world or bring you to mine, or well create a new world, just ours." There was urgency in his voice now, almost desperation. "But don't ask me to pretend this isn't real. Not when every fiber of my being is screaming that you're the most real thing I've ever had." Emily felt tears burn her eyes. "Lucas." But before she could finish, applause erupted. The music had ended. They were standing in the center of the dance floor, holding each other, oblivious to the fact that the dance was over. Lucas cleared his throat, composing himself. He took Emily's hand, brought it to his lips, and pressed a long kiss, too long to be just acting on her knuckles. Then, with his other hand at the small of her back, he guided her off the floor, but Emily could feel everyone's eyes on them, could hear the whispers, the speculation, and when she passed Catherine Sterling, she saw something in the older woman's face that chilled her to the bone. Knowledge. Catherine knew that something had changed between her son and the freelance designer from Brooklyn, and the expression on her face wasn't one of approval. Later that night, in the quiet of the guest house, Emily stood on the balcony, still wearing the emerald green dress, watching the lights of the main mansion. She held a glass of wine, an obscenely expensive Bordeaux that Lucas had left for her, and tried to process everything that had happened. "I'm completely, irrevocably in love with you." The words echoed in her mind over and over. She should be happy, should be euphoric, but all she felt was terror because she had fallen in love too, deeply, completely, irrevocably, and there was no contract in the world that could protect her from what came next. Footsteps on the stones made her turn. Lucas was there, his bow tie undone and hanging around his neck, the first buttons of his shirt open, his hair tousled as if he'd run his hands through it several times. "I couldn't stay away," he said simply. Emily should send him away, should reinforce the boundaries, remember the rules. But she was tired of fighting, tired of pretending she didn't feel what she felt. "Then don't," she whispered. And when Lucas crossed the balcony and pulled her into his arms, when he pressed his forehead against hers and simply held her, no kisses, nothing more, just the comfort of being close, Emily knew she'd crossed a point of no return. They were free-falling into something neither of them knew how to contain. And terrifying as it was, Emily didn't want to stop the fall anymore. The night of the charity event had been exhausting. 3 hours of forced smiles, empty conversations with donors who saw people as investments, and the constant pressure of representing something Emily still wasn't sure was real or elaborately constructed. Lucas had been by her side the entire time, her anchor, her protection. But even his presence couldn't completely dispel the fatigue seeping into her bones. The limousine glided through Manhattan's streets, the dark windows transforming the city outside into a blur of neon lights and shadows. Inside, the silence was thick, loaded with something unspoken. Emily was sunk into the leather seat, eyes closed, head resting back. She could feel Lucas' gaze on her constant, intense, like a physical weight. Tired? His voice cut through the silence, hoarse and low. Exhausted. Emily opened her eyes and found him watching her with an expression that made her heart skip a beat. There was something different in his eyes tonight, something darker, more hungry, less controlled. You were perfect in there. Lucas moved on the seat, getting closer, not touching, but close enough that Emily could feel the heat radiating from him. The way you handled that arrogant investor. How you made the ambassador's wife laugh. You belong in that world more than most people born into it. I don't belong, Lucas. I never will. Emily turned her head to face him. I'm just getting really good at pretending. What if you weren't pretending? He extended his hand slowly, giving her time to pull back. When she didn't, his fingers traced the line of her jaw so softly it was almost a whisper of a touch. What if this was real? Emily closed her eyes at the touch, fighting the urge to lean into it. Lucas, we can't have this conversation again. When did we stop pretending, Emily? He moved closer and now she could feel his breath on her face. Tell me, because I know exactly when I stopped. It was in that cafe when you put your hand in mine, and I felt like I'd completed a circuit I didn't know was broken. It's not that simple. It's exactly that simple. His hand moved from her face to her hair, fingers threading through the loose strands. We complicate it because we're scared. But the truth is simple. I want you not for 6 months. Not as part of a contract. I want you. Emily's heart was beating so hard she was certain he could hear it. What if it's just desire? Proximity confused with feeling? Then test it. Lucas leaned in, his lips hovering over hers so close she could feel the heat, but not the touch. Kiss me here, now. No audience, no reason to pretend. And tell me you don't feel anything. It was a challenge, a trap, and Emily knew it. But she was tired of fighting, tired of denying what her body screamed every time he was near. So she did something that terrified her. She closed the distance between them. The kiss started soft, tentative lips meeting with the hesitation of those exploring unknown territory. But then something broke, a dam that had been building for weeks, and the kiss deepened. Lucas groaned low against her mouth, his hand in her hair tightening, pulling her closer. The other hand found her waist, fingers pressing through the thin fabric of her dress. Emily heard herself moan, the sound surprised and desperate. Her hands found his chest, feeling the tense muscles beneath the expensive shirt, his heart beating wildly. She grabbed his lapel and pulled him closer, deeper as if she could merge with him. When they finally separated, both were breathless, staring at each other in the car's dimness. Lucas' lips were swollen, eyes darkened by desire, chest rising and falling rapidly. Still think it's just proximity? His voice was hoarse, rough with barely contained need. Emily couldn't speak, just shook her head. Good. Lucas pressed his forehead against hers, eyes closed as if trying to regain control. Good. When the limousine stopped at the Sterling property, neither of them moved immediately. They stayed there, breaths intertwined, bodies vibrating with unresolved tension. Finally, Lucas pulled back, ran a hand through his hair, and opened the door. I should walk you to the guest house, he said, his voice still not quite steady. Emily nodded, not trusting her own voice. They walked in silence along the lit path, the distance between them charged with electricity. Each step seemed to increase the tension, like a rope being stretched to the breaking point. When they reached the guest house door, Emily grabbed the keys with trembling hands. Emily. Lucas' voice stopped her. She turned to face him and saw devastating conflict in his eyes. If I come in, if I cross that door with you tonight, it won't be pretending. It won't be part of the contract. It will be real. Everything will be real. I know. And she did. God, how she knew. And terrified. So am I. He took a step toward her. But more terrified of the idea of letting you go. Emily looked at him, at the man who'd been a stranger 2 months ago, and was now someone who knew her fears, her hopes, the way she twisted her hair when nervous. She thought about the rules Shed established, the boundaries Shed drawn, and realized all those protections were useless now. Shed already fallen in love. It was too late to protect herself. So she turned the key, opened the door, and without looking back whispered, "Come in." The door closed behind them with a soft click that seemed to seal something irreversible. The guest house interior was wrapped in twilight, only the soft moonlight entering through the windows, painting everything in shades of silver and shadow. For a moment, they just stood there looking at each other, the weight of what was about to happen hanging in the air like something tangible. Lucas took the first step, slow, deliberate. His eyes never left hers, giving her 1,000 opportunities to pull back, to change her mind. But Emily remained still, heart beating like a war drum, her entire body vibrating with anticipation and fear in equal measures. When he was close enough to touch, he raised his hands and held her face between his palms. "I don't know when I stopped pretending. Emily," he whispered, voice thick with emotion, "I just know you're everything I want." Emily covered his hands with hers. "I'm scared," she admitted. "I'm scared that when the 6 months are over." "Forget the 6 months." Lucas pressed his forehead against hers. "Forget the contract. Forget everything that isn't this now, the two of us." And then he kissed her. Not like in the car, not desperate and hungry. This kiss was different. It was slow, deep, as if he were trying to memorize every contour of her lips, as if they had all the time in the world. His hand slid from her face to her hair, gently undoing the pins, holding it up, allowing it to fall in waves over her shoulders. Emily moaned against his mouth, her hands finding the buttons of his shirt. She unbuttoned them one by one, fingers trembling but determined, revealing the warm skin underneath. When she pushed the shirt off his shoulders, her palms flattened against his bare chest, feeling the tense muscles, the wild heartbeat. Emily. Her name came out like a prayer. Lucas pulled back just enough to look into her eyes. "Are you sure? Because if you're not, we stop now. No matter how much I want you, I won't." She silenced him with another kiss, deeper, bolder. "I'm sure," she whispered against his lips. "I'm more sure of you than anything in my life." It was the permission he'd been waiting for. His hands found the zipper on the back of her dress, pulling it down with torturous slowness. The fabric slipped over her shoulders, falling in a whisper of silk at her feet, leaving her there in only lingerie black lace that contrasted with her pale skin. Lucas stepped back, his eyes traveling over every inch of her with an intensity that made Emily tremble. "You're the most beautiful thing I've ever seen," he said, his voice rough. Emily felt the blush rise up her neck, but didn't pull back. Instead, she extended her hand. "Come here." He closed the distance between them in 2 steps, pulling her into his arms, skin against skin now, heat meeting heat. He kissed her again, neck, collarbone, the valley between her breasts. Each touch of his mouth sent waves of pleasure through her entire body. Her hands explored his back, feeling every muscle, every line as if mapping new territory. "Bedroom," she managed to say between kisses. Lucas needed no more encouragement. He picked her up, a movement so fluid and effortless it drew a surprised laugh from her, and walked the few meters to the bedroom. He placed her gently on the bed, the mattress yielding under their weight, and then hovered over her, propped on his elbows, looking at her with an expression so tender it made her eyes burn. "You're precious to me," he said, fingers tracing the outline of her face. "More precious than anything in this world." "Lucas." She pulled him down, needing him closer, needing to feel his weight, his warmth, the solid reality of him. "Stop talking and just love me." Something changed in his eyes, the last remnant of control dissolving. "Always," he promised. And then there were no more words, only sensations. His hands exploring every curve, every line of her body, as if it were something sacred. His mouth leaving a trail of fire across her skin, neck, shoulders, the inside of her wrists. His skilled fingers undoing her bra, revealing her completely. Emily arched against him when his mouth found her breast, moaning loudly, hands clutching his shoulders. Sensations flooded her, too much, but not enough. She wanted more, wanted everything. Her hands found his belt, undoing it with impatient fingers. Lucas laughed low against her skin, a deep masculine sound that reverberated through her. He pulled away only long enough to rid himself of the rest of his clothes, and then he was back naked, skin against naked skin, nothing between them now. Emily. He held her face, forcing her to look into his eyes. Are you sure? More sure than I've ever been of anything. And it was true. Every doubt, every fear, everything dissolved before the absolute certainty of this moment. When they finally joined, it was with a reverent slowness that stole the air from Emily's lungs. Lucas moved slowly, his eyes never leaving hers, watching every reaction, every moan that escaped her lips. It was intimate in a way Shed never experienced, not just physical, but emotional, almost spiritual. Look at me, he whispered when she closed her eyes, overwhelmed by the sensations. I want to see you, all of you. So Emily forced her eyes open and lost herself in his gaze, golden, intense, full of something so deep it scared and comforted her at the same time. They moved together, finding a rhythm that was uniquely theirs, not hurried, not desperate, just perfectly synchronized. His hands intertwined with hers, fingers connected, bodies connected, souls connected in some fundamental way that Emily couldn't explain, but could feel in every fiber of her being. When pleasure finally swept over them, first her, then him it was, with an intensity that left them both trembling, clinging to each other as if they were the only solid things in a world spinning out of control. Afterward, lying tangled beneath the sheets, breathing gradually calming, the outside world slowly coming back into focus, Lucas pressed a kiss to the top of Emily's head. She lay with her head on his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart, his fingers tracing lazy patterns on her bare back. I don't want this to end, he said in the night's quiet voice and vulnerable. Emily pressed a kiss to his chest, right over his heart. Then, don't let it end. Lucas moved, turning her so he could look at her face. There was something so serious in his eyes it made her heart squeeze. I love you, he said. The words simple but weighted. I know it's crazy. I know it's fast, but I love you, Emily Cooper. Not as part of a contract, not as part of a plan. I love you because you're you, because you make me want to be better, because when I'm with you I finally feel at home. Tears burned Emily's eyes. Lucas, you don't have to say it back, he hurried to add, seeing the expression on her face. I'm not pressuring you. I just needed you to know, needed you to understand that this, tonight, wasn't about desire or convenience. It was about love. At least for me. Emily touched his face, fingers tracing the line of his jaw. You're an idiot, she whispered, but she was smiling through the tears. He blinked, confused. What? An idiot for thinking you have to say that alone. She leaned in and kissed him soft and sweet. I love you too. Probably since that first coffee when you held my hand and I felt like the world had realigned. I was just too scared to admit it. The smile that lit up Lucas' face was pure, unfiltered, and absolutely devastating. He pulled her into his arms, holding her so tight she could barely breathe, and laughed a sound of relief and joy and something that sounded dangerously close to tears. Say it again, he asked, his face buried in her hair. I love you. Again. I love you, Lucas Sterling. Again. Emily laughed, pushing him playfully. How many times do you need to hear it? He rolled so he was over her again, propped on his elbows, looking at her with an expression so tender it made her heart melt. 1,000,000 times. And then 1,000,000 more. Greedy when it comes to you. Absolutely. He kissed her deep and long. And now that I have you, I'm not letting go. Contract, deadline, 6 months, all of that can go to hell. You're mine and am yours forever, if you'll let me. Forever, Emily echoed. And for the first time since this all began, she believed that maybe, just maybe, fairy tales could happen in real life, even ones that started with lies. The days following that night were wrapped in a bubble of happiness Emily had never experienced. Lucas began sleeping at the guest house, not every night, but frequently enough that Emily would wake to his warmth beside her, to his arms around her, to the certainty that this was real. They laughed during breakfast, kissed in the kitchen like teenagers, and lost themselves in each other whenever possible. But bubbles, Emily learned, always burst. The summons came on a rainy Tuesday morning, a simple, formal message sent by Patricia, Catherine's assistant. Mrs. Sterling requests your presence for lunch today. 1, 0 inches her private study. Just the two of you. Emily read the message 3 times, each word weighing like lead in her stomach. She was on the guest house balcony, wrapped in one of Lucas' sweaters too big for her, smelling of his cologne, watching the rain fall on the gardens. The sky was gray, heavy, as if nature itself was foreshadowing something. Bad omen. Lucas appeared behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist, chin resting on her shoulder. "Your mother wants to see me alone." She felt Lucas tense. "When?" "Today. 1. Don't go." His voice was firm, protective. "Or I'll go with you." "Lucas." Emily turned in his arms, placing her hands on his chest. "Eventually, I'll need to face her alone if we're going to make this work. If this is going to be real, I can't hide behind you forever." He held her face between his hands, worry evident in his eyes. "My mother can be relentless when she wants something, and Emily, she wants to test you. She'll look for cracks, weaknesses, then I won't give her any." Emily tried to sound more confident than she felt. Lucas kissed her soft, prolonged, as if trying to transfer strength through touch. "You're stronger than she imagines," he whispered against her lips. "But if you need me, if at any point it's too much, call me. I'll be there in seconds." Catherine Sterling's study was exactly what Emily expected: elegant, intimidating, permeated with the scent of white roses and consolidated power. The walls were lined with mahogany shelves filled with leather-bound volumes, first editions. Emily suspected, not books to be read but to be displayed. A marble fireplace dominated one wall, the fire crackling softly despite the warmth already present in the room. The tall windows offered a view of the gardens, now blurred by the continuing rain. Catherine sat behind an antique desk, wearing a perfectly tailored ivory suit, pearls at her neck, her gray hair pulled into an impeccable bun. She looked up when Emily entered and for a moment simply studied her with those steel-gray eyes that missed nothing. "Emily, thank you for coming." The voice was polite, but there was a coldness there that made the air feel colder. "Please sit." Emily sat in the chair, facing the desk back straight, hands clasped in her lap to hide the trembling. "Mrs. Sterling, Catherine, please. We're going to be family after all." The words should have been warm but sounded like a blade wrapped in velvet. "Tea?" "No, thank you." Catherine nodded, picking up her own cup, white porcelain with gold details, and took a delicate sip before placing it back on the saucer without making a sound. "I'll get straight to the point, Emily. I respect your time and mine too much for unnecessary games." "I appreciate that. I had you investigated." The statement was made with the same casualness someone might comment about the weather. It's standard when someone enters our family. "I hope you understand." Emily's stomach churned, but she kept her expression neutral. "I understand. Then you know that I know everything. Your debts, your near eviction, the precarious financial situation that led you to—" Catherine paused, choosing the word carefully, "except Lucas' initial proposal." The silence that followed was heavy, loaded with unspoken accusation. Emily forced herself to meet Catherine's eyes, not to back down. "I won't pretend I didn't need the money. Yes, I was desperate. Yes, I accepted, because $50,000 meant survival, honesty." "Interesting." Catherine tilted her head as if Emily were a fascinating puzzle. "Most women in your position would deny it, invent romantic stories about love at first sight. I'm not most women." "No, you're not." A small smile, not exactly warm but perhaps respectful. "And that's exactly why you're dangerous." Emily blinked. "Dangerous?" Catherine stood, moving to the window, watching the rain with her hands clasped behind her back. "My son Lucas has always been pragmatic, controlled. He understands how the world works, power, business, strategic alliances. Has never let emotions cloud his judgment." She turned, facing Emily directly. "Until you, Mrs. Sterling, has in love with you, truly in love." Catherine said this as if it were a disease, and that makes him vulnerable. Vulnerability in our world is a weakness that can be exploited. Emily stood, refusing to remain seated while being judged. "If you're suggesting I intend to exploit him, I'm not suggesting anything. I'm simply presenting facts." Catherine walked to the desk and picked up a thick envelope. "This envelope contains a check $1.5 million. The air left Emily's lungs. What? $1.5 million. $500,000 more than Lucas promised. Catherine extended the envelope, but Emily didn't take it. All you have to do is end the engagement discreetly. Tell Lucas you realized you can't live in this world, that the differences between you are too great. Hell be hurt, but hell get over it. Men always get over it. You're offering me money to leave him. Emily's voice came out calmer than she felt shock giving way to cold anger. I'm offering you freedom, Catherine corrected, and an opportunity to restart your life without the complications that come with being involved with my family. Emily, you seem like a smart young woman. Surely you realize this can't work long term. Why not? Because you're from different worlds. For the first time, Catherine's composure cracked, emotion leaking through the fissures. He was born with responsibilities, expectations, a legacy of generations. She paused. You're a freelancer from Brooklyn who could barely pay rent 2 months ago. How exactly do you imagine this ends? The words were like stabs, each one piercing, because they carried seeds of truths Emily had already contemplated in her darkest moments. I don't know, she admitted, her voice trembling only slightly. I don't know how this ends, but I know I love him truly. And not for his money, not for this world of privilege, but for who he is when we're alone, when the masks fall. Catherine watched her for a long moment. And you think love is enough? No. Emily shook her head. Love isn't enough, but it's a start, and I'm willing to fight for the rest. Noble, but naive. Catherine placed the envelope on the desk. I'll leave the offer here. Think about it. You don't have to decide now. I've already decided. Emily turned to leave. Emily. Catherine's voice stopped her at the door. One last thing. Emily looked over her shoulder. My son deserves someone who loves him enough to let him go when necessary. Sometimes the greatest act of love is recognizing when you're the wrong person, no matter how much you want to be the right one. The words chased Emily down the hallway, down the stairs, through the rain-soaked gardens to the guest house. Each step weighed more than the last. Each of Catherine's words echoed in her mind like a funeral bell. Different worlds. Can't work. You're dangerous for him. The greatest act of love. Emily spent the rest of the day alone, refusing Lucas' calls, sending short messages saying she was fine, just tired. She sat on the balcony, even with the rain still falling, wrapped in a blanket, watching the drops create patterns on the glass. Was Catherine right? Was she the wrong person for Lucas? No matter how much she loved him, he deserved someone from his world, someone who understood the unwritten rules, who could navigate rooms full of power without feeling like an imposter, someone Catherine would approve of. But then Emily thought of all the mornings waking in his arms, the way he laughed when she made bad jokes, how his eyes lit up when she entered a room, the way he held her as if she were something precious and fragile and strong all at once. She thought about love, not fairy tale love, but real love, complicated, imperfect, the kind of love that requires sacrifice. And as night fell and the lights of the main mansion came on one by one, Emily made the hardest decision of her life. The letter was brief, simple, each word costing a piece of her soul. Lucas, when we met, I needed salvation and you needed a solution. I gave you the solution. You gave me so much more. You gave me love, hope, the feeling of belonging. But your mother is right. We're from different worlds. And as much as I love you and God, I love you so much, it hurts. I can't be the reason you become vulnerable. I can't be the weakness that others exploit. You deserve someone who can stand beside you without fear, without doubt, someone who belongs in your world in a way I never will. Don't look for me. Please let this be my last gift to you. The freedom to live the life you should live with someone who can truly deserve you. Thank you for the most real weeks of my life. Always yours, Emily. She left the letter on the coffee table next to the engagement ring, the diamond catching the lamplight, sparkling as if it were crying. She took only a small suitcase, the clothes shed originally brought, nothing Lucas had bought. She left Catherine's check torn to pieces in the trash. She hadn't accepted the money. She wasn't going to accept it now. The taxi arrived at 3:00 the morning. The driver helped her with the suitcase, asking no questions about the young woman with red, swollen eyes, leaving a mansion in the middle of the night. As they drove away, Emily looked back one last time. The lights of the guest house, her temporary home were all off. The main mansion was silent, sleeping. And somewhere inside those walls, Lucas slept, not knowing that when he woke, she would be gone. Like a reverse Cinderella, Emily fled before midnight, before the spell could break, and reveal that she was just an ordinary girl who fell in love with someone extraordinary, before she could see the expression on his face when he realized Shed left. Because if she saw that, Shed never have the strength to leave. And leaving, she realized with her heart broken into 1,000 pieces, was the only way to save him from herself. 3 months, 90 days, 2,160 hours since Emily had left that letter and fled like a thief in the night. Each second had been an eternity of self-imposed pain. Each minute a reminder that doing the right thing sometimes hurts more than anything wrong ever could. Emily was back in her small studio in Brooklyn, not the same one as before, but a similar one in a different building. This one had larger windows, allowing more light in, and there were no eviction notices on the door. The money Lucas had deposited in her account before she could refuse the first $500,000 from the contract had secured that. Shed thought about returning it, but knew he'd never accept it. So she used it to stabilize her life, pay off debts, create a solid foundation. But money doesn't fill the person-shaped void in your heart. She kept busy, worked on projects that challenged her, accepted clients who inspired her, built the kind of career Shed always wanted but never had space to pursue. During the day she functioned, smiled on video calls, delivered excellent work, even laughed occasionally. But at night, alone in the dark, she allowed the tears to come, allowed the longing to consume her. The way Lucas smelled in the morning, the sound of his laugh, the way his eyes lit up when he saw her, the feeling of being in his arms, safe and loved and completely accepted. She hadn't looked for news about him, hadn't searched his name online, hadn't checked social media, hadn't allowed herself that particular torture. Clean break, she decided, like ripping off a Band-Aid, fast, brutal, but necessary. So it was a shock when the doorbell rang on a rainy Tuesday afternoon, exactly 3 months and 2 days since Shed left, and Emily opened the door to find, not Lucas, but his father. Richard Sterling was an older version of Lucas, the same strong bone structure, the same golden eyes, but with completely gray hair and deep lines of experience marking his face. He wore an expensive overcoat against the rain, holding an umbrella, and watched her with an expression that was simultaneously evaluative and kind. Mr. Sterling. Emily couldn't hide her surprise. Miss Cooper, may I come in? Or would you prefer I freeze here in the hallway? There was a touch of dry humor in his voice that reminded her so much of Lucas it made her chest ache. She stepped back, allowing him to enter. The apartment suddenly seemed smaller, more humble under his gaze. But Richard didn't look around with judgment, just with polite curiosity as he closed the umbrella and propped it near the door. Can I offer you tea? Coffee? Emily hated how nervous her voice sounded. Coffee, if it's no trouble. Black. He sat in the only armchair in the small living room, refusing to make the moment more uncomfortable than it already was. Emily prepared the coffee with slightly trembling hands, her mind racing. Why was Lucas' father here? What did he want? Had Lucas sent him? No, Lucas would respect her decision to leave. This could only mean, does he know you're here? Emily asked as she handed the cup to Richard, sitting cautiously on the opposite sofa. No, and I prefer it stay that way. Richard took a sip of the coffee, nodded with approval. I came on my own against my wife's wishes, I should add. Catherine knows I left. Catherine orchestrated your departure. It wasn't an accusation, just a fact. She told me about the conversation, the offer. She also told me you refused the money. It wasn't mine to take. Richard watched her for a long moment, those golden eyes so much like Lucas, reading every detail of her expression. Do you know what happened after you left? Emily shook her head, not trusting her voice. Lucas woke up and found your letter. Read it 3 times, according to the house staff. Then he went to the main mansion, walked into Catherine's office, and for the first time in his adult life he yelled at his mother. Richard paused. Didn't argue, didn't debate, yelled. Said things that... He cleared his throat. That needed to be said long ago, about control, about love, about allowing people to make their own choices. Tears burned Emily's eyes. Mr. Sterling, he was devastated, Emily. Still is. Richard leaned forward. My son is many things: stubborn, proud, sometimes overly controlled. But when he loves completely. And he loves you. I know. Emily's voice broke. I know, and that's why I left. Because your wife is right. We're from different worlds. I would make him vulnerable. You made him human. Richard cut in gently. For the first time, I saw my son truly happy, not satisfied, not comfortable, but happy with that messy, imperfect joy that comes from loving someone who surprises you, challenges you, makes you want to be better. Emily wiped the tears running down her face. So why are you here? To tell me how much I hurt him, to tell you he was never stronger than when he was with you. Richard set his cup aside. Catherine sees vulnerability where there's true strength. Yes, love can be exploited, but it can also be the thing that keeps us standing when everything else crumbles. He paused. And to tell you that in the 3 months since you left, he's shown up to work, fulfilled his obligations, been the perfect son he's always been, but the light went out. Emily, that spark you ignited in him, it's gone. What do you want me to do? Emily whispered. I want you to be honest with yourself. Did you leave for him or for you? Richard stood, preparing to leave. Or did you leave because you were afraid of not being good enough? The words hit like a punch to the stomach. Isn't that the same thing? It's completely different. He walked to the door, picked up his umbrella. One is sacrifice. The other is cowardice. He opened the door, then looked back. My son deserves someone brave enough to stay, Emily, even when it's scary. Especially when it's scary. And then he was gone, leaving Emily alone with her tears and the devastating truth she'd been avoiding for 3 months. She hadn't left to protect Lucas. She'd left to protect herself from the possibility of failing, of not being enough, of eventually losing what she loved most. She'd left because she was afraid. It took another 2 weeks for Emily to gather courage, 2 weeks of sleepless nights, of looking at her phone 1,000 times, of writing and deleting messages she never sent, 2 weeks of internal war between the fear that made her run and the love that made her want to return. Finally, on a Friday night, with trembling hands and her heart beating so hard she could hear it, Emily typed a simple message. Can we talk? The response took 4 hours, 4 hours of hell, where Emily stared at her phone, imagining 1,000 reasons why he wouldn't respond, why it was too late, why she'd destroyed something irreparable. But then at 11 at night, the response came. 3 words. Café Libre, tomorrow. 10 a.m. The same place where it all began. Emily didn't know if this was poetic or cruel, maybe both. Emily arrived 15 minutes early, palms sweating, stomach churning. She wore simple jeans and a navy blue sweater, nothing fancy, nothing trying to impress. Just her. If this was going to work, it had to be with her, being completely, honestly herself. The cafe was less crowded than the first time. The familiar smell of coffee and old books should have been comforting, but only made her heart squeeze with memories. And then she saw him. Lucas sat at the same corner table near the window, but he looked different, thinner perhaps, more tired. There were shadows under his eyes that hadn't been there before, and when he saw her enter, the expression that crossed his face, pain, hope, anger, love, all at once, almost made her turn and run again. But she didn't run. This time, she walked to him. Hi. Her voice came out weaker than intended. Hi. His voice was careful, controlled, but she could hear the barely contained emotion underneath. Emily sat, hands clasped on the table to stop the trembling. For a long moment, they just looked at each other, years of communication happening in silence. Are you okay? She finally asked, knowing it was a stupid question but not knowing how to start. No, he didn't try to soften it. I'm not. You destroyed me, Emily. I woke up and you were gone without giving me a chance to fight, to convince you to stay. Just gone. I know. And I'm sorry. Why? The question came out with more force than he probably intended. Why did you leave? The letter said one thing, but I need to hear it from you, looking in my eyes. The truth. Emily took a deep breath, forcing herself to maintain eye contact even when every instinct screamed to look away. Your mother was right about many things. We're from different worlds. I don't belong, no. Lucas hit his hand on the table, making the cups rattle. Several people looked. He didn't care. Don't give me the edited version. Don't give me what you think I want to hear. Give me the truth. Tears burned Emily's eyes. I was scared, she admitted, her voice breaking. Scared of not being good enough. That eventually you'd realize you made a mistake. That love wouldn't be enough to overcome all the differences between us. I was scared of staying and watching you realize your mother was right, that I was the wrong choice. So you decided for me. It wasn't a question. You decided I was incapable of making my own choices about who to love. It wasn't like that. It was exactly like that. Lucas leaned forward and she could see the anger now glinting beneath the pain. You told me you loved me, made me believe we had something real. And then you ran at the first sign of difficulty, the first time someone questioned if we belonged together. I was trying to protect you. From what? From loving you? From being happy? He shook his head, a bitter laugh escaping. Emily, you didn't protect me. You shattered me. The silence that followed was heavy, loaded with 3 months of pain and unspoken words. Emily wiped the tears flowing freely now, not caring who saw. You're right about everything. I was a coward. I ran because I was afraid, and in doing so I hurt you in the worst possible way. She paused, gathering courage. But I'm here now 3 months later, not because your father showed up, though he did. Not because I feel guilty, though I do. I'm here because I realize that spending every day without you isn't protection. It's just a different kind of pain, and if I'm going to hurt either way, she met his eyes, it'd rather hurt while fighting for you than while running from you. Lucas watched her, his expression impossible to read. And what's changed? The differences between our worlds still exist. My mother will still challenge you. People will still judge you. It'll still be hard. I know nothing's changed except, she swallowed hard, except me. I realize the only opinion that matters about whether I belong in your world is yours. And if you still want me, if you still believe we can make this work, then I'll stop running. I'll stay and fight, even when it's scary, especially when it's scary. For an endless moment, Lucas said nothing, just watched her. Those golden eyes searching for sincerity, regret, love. Then slowly he extended his hand across the table, palm up, offering. Emily looked at his hand, the same one that had held hers in this exact place 3 months ago, sealing a deal that had transformed into something much more. Without hesitation this time, without fear, she placed her hand in his. I'm going to ask you a question, Lucas said, intertwining his fingers with hers. And I need you to be completely honest. Anything. Do you love me? Not the world I live in. Not the possibilities. Not the security. Do you love who I am when we strip everything else away? Yes. Emily didn't hesitate. I love you in a suit commanding boardrooms and in sweats in the kitchen making terrible pancakes. I love you when you're charming at parties and when you're vulnerable in the dark. I love all the pieces of you, Lucas Sterling, even the complicated pieces. A smile, small, tentative, but real, touched his lips. Terrible pancakes. Awful. You're a terrible cook. Good to know. Brutal honesty is back. But he was really smiling now, and Emily felt something loosen in her chest. So here's my proposal. No contracts this time. No deadlines, just the two of us figuring out how to make this work. One day at a time. And your mother? My mother will have to accept that you're not going anywhere. And eventually, he squeezed her hand. Shell, see what I saw from the beginning, that you're extraordinary. Emily let out a sob that was half laugh, half cry. I'm not extraordinary. I'm just me. Exactly. Lucas stood, pulling her up and into his arms in one motion. And just you is everything I've always wanted. They stood there, embraced in the middle of the cafe, oblivious to curious looks, whispers, the world spinning around them. Emily buried her face in his chest, breathing in the smell shed missed every day, cologne, coffee, home. I missed you so much, she whispered against his shirt. I know. Me too. He kissed the top of her head. "Don't do that again. Don't run. Promise me that when it gets scary, when it gets hard, you stay and fight. I promise." Emily pulled back just enough to look into his eyes. "And I promise to be honest about my fears, my insecurities, everything. And I promise to listen and to remind you every day that you belong with me, with us." He touched her face, thumb wiping away one last tear. "Ready to try again?" Emily covered his hand with hers, turning her face to kiss his palm. More ready than ever. And when Lucas kissed her there, soft, tender, full of promises of second chances and new beginnings, Emily knew she was home. Finally, truly home. The June morning sun filtered through the white linen curtains, painting the bedroom in golden and amber tones. Emily woke slowly, that kind of peaceful awakening that comes only when you're completely at peace. The smell of fresh coffee rose from the kitchen, mixing with the scent of jasmine entering through the open window. Outside, she could hear a child's crystalline laughter, high-pitched, joyful, absolutely contagious. She smiled before even opening her eyes completely. 6 years. It had been 6 years since that day at the cafe when she and Lucas had decided to try again. 6 years of ups and downs, of challenges faced side by side, of love that grew deeper and more complex with each passing season. Emily stretched her wedding ring, catching the morning light. Not the original engagement ring with the huge diamond, but something simpler they'd chosen together. Rose gold with small diamonds, delicate but resilient, like them. "Mommy, Mommy, wake up." The door burst open and a small hurricane of energy came running in. Michael Sterling, 4 years old, dark, disheveled hair and golden eyes. Identical to his father's, wearing dinosaur pajamas and holding a crumpled drawing. "Good morning, my love." Emily opened her arms and Michael threw himself on the bed, climbing over her with the adorable lack of coordination of a small child. "I made a drawing for you. Look." He unfolded the paper with evident pride. It was a chaotic mix of colors, green, blue, yellow, that could be anything or nothing. "It's our house. And this is me. And this is Daddy. And this is you. And this is Grandpa Richard." Emily studied the drawing with the seriousness it deserved. "It's absolutely perfect. Should we put it on the fridge?" "Yes." Michael jumped off the bed and ran out as fast as Head entered, yelling, "Daddy! Daddy! Mommy's awake!" Emily laughed, shaking her head as she got up. She put on a light robe, the June air was already warming, and walked barefoot through the house's hallways. Not the Sterling main mansion, but the old guest house, now completely remodeled and expanded. Walls had been torn down, rooms added, a huge balcony built. It was theirs, now truly theirs. A home built not with Sterling money, but with joint choices, compromises, love. In the kitchen, Lucas stood by the stove wearing gray sweatpants and a white t-shirt, hair still damp from his shower. Michael was perched on the counter beside him, swinging his little legs, narrating something about dinosaurs with intense enthusiasm. Lucas listened with genuine attention, nodding at the right moments, asking questions about T-Rex versus Triceratops. Emily stopped in the doorway, allowing herself a moment to simply observe. This man, who 6 years ago Shed known as a controlled and distant billionaire, was now making pancakes, still bad, she noted with affection, for their son, laughing at 4-year-old jokes, completely present in a way she knew had never been before. Michael was born. "You're watching." Lucas didn't turn, but she could hear the smile in his voice. "Just admiring the view." Emily entered the kitchen, kissing the top of Michael's head before approaching Lucas. He turned immediately, wrapping an arm around her, pulling her against him while continuing to flip pancakes with the other hand. "Sleep well?" He kissed her temple, that casual gesture of intimacy that had become second nature over the years. "Perfectly." She leaned into him, feeling the solid warmth of his body, the steady beat of his heart. "You?" Michael came into the room at 5:30, saying the birds were too loud. Lucas rolled his eyes with affection. "We spent the last hour and a half bird watching out the window and discussing the difference between sparrows and blackbirds. Blackbirds are bigger," Michael contributed with authority, "and they have yellow beaks." "Hess not wrong," Emily laughed, picking up a cup of coffee. Lucas had already prepared exact amount of cream, no sugar, exactly how she liked it. 6 years and he never forgot. After breakfast burned pancakes that Michael declared the best in the world with the unwavering loyalty of a child, they moved to the balcony. It was one of those perfect June days, cloudless blue sky, a gentle breeze carrying the scent of roses from the gardens Emily had planted 3 years ago. Michael was on the lawn chasing butterflies with the serious determination of someone on an important mission. Lucas and Emily sat on the porch steps, shoulders touching, watching their son play. "Remember when we first lived here?" Emily said softly, her voice nostalgic. "When it was all pretending, when I had rules about touching and carefully drawn boundaries." Lucas laughed, the sound deep and rich. "I remember you telling me that when we were alone without an audience, I needed to keep my distance, and you respected that." "Most of the time." She nudged him playfully. "Most of the time," he agreed, taking her hand and intertwining their fingers. "But there were moments when I simply couldn't stay away, when the pretending felt more real than anything it ever experienced." Emily squeezed his hand. "You know what still surprises me?" "What?" "That all of this started with a lie, a contract, $50,000 to pretend for one night." She turned to face him, meeting those golden eyes that still made her heart race. "And now it's the truest thing I have." Lucas released her hand only to pull her closer, his arm around her shoulders, holding her against his chest. "It wasn't the lie that brought us here," he said softly. "It was the courage to admit the truth when it showed up, to stop pretending and start feeling." Deep philosophy for a Saturday morning, Mr. Sterling. "I'm a man of many layers, Mrs. Sterling." He kissed the top of her head. "Besides, I have a 4-year-old who wakes me at 5:30. I sleep little, think too much." Emily laughed, happiness bubbling in her chest like champagne. She watched Michael, who had now given up on butterflies and was examining something on probably an ant or beetle. "He looks so much like you," she said. "Not just the appearance, the way he focuses completely on things that interest him, the determination, that little crease between his eyebrows when he's thinking seriously." "He has your stubbornness," Lucas countered, "and your refusal to accept no as an answer." "Fair." Emily smiled. "He comes from a long line of stubborn people." Later that afternoon, Catherine Sterling appeared for her weekly visit. Emily had learned over the years that the Sterling matriarch was significantly more complex than that first intimidating impression. Beneath the pearls and impeccable posture, there was a woman who loved her family fiercely, sometimes in questionable ways, but always with intentions she believed were right. Their relationship wasn't easy, it probably never would be, but they'd found a rhythm, mutual respect, if not always agreement. And when Michael was born, something had changed in Catherine. Shed softened in ways Emily suspected Catherine herself hadn't anticipated. "Grandma!" Michael ran to Catherine as soon as she got out of the car, and to Emily's continued surprise, the woman who always seemed so controlled bent down in a Chanel suit, no less, and opened her arms to her grandson. "My dear boy." Catherine hugged him, then pulled back to study him seriously. "You've grown since last week. I'm certain of it." "I grew this much." Michael stretched his arms as wide as possible. "And I found a giant beetle today. Want to see?" "Absolutely." Catherine took his hand and allowed him to lead her to the garden, where apparently the beetle was still being monitored. Lucas appeared beside Emily, both watching the scene with intertwined surprise and affection. "He'll never get used to this," he murmured. "My mother, who used to terrorize CEOs with a look, is now genuinely interested in beetles. Michael has that effect on people." Emily leaned into him. "He got you to start watching dinosaur cartoons at 6. 0 inches the morning. Touché." When Catherine finally emerged from the beetle expedition, she joined Lucas and Emily on the balcony. A maid had brought tea because, of course, even casual visits to grandchildren came with proper tea service. "Has a remarkable child," Catherine said, watching Michael, who was now building something with wooden blocks on the lawn. "Curious, intelligent, kind." "Thank you." Emily accepted the compliment, knowing that coming from Catherine, it was significant. Catherine turned to face her directly, those steel-gray eyes softened by age but still sharp. "I was wrong about you." The silence that followed was heavy. Lucas stiffened beside Emily, but she touched his knee gently. "It's okay. When you first appeared," Catherine continued, "I saw only what I expected to see, a young woman from modest origins, dazzled by my son's world, probably interested in his money. She paused, taking a delicate sip of tea. I was wrong, and worse, in trying to protect my son. I nearly destroyed the best thing that ever happened to him. Mother Lucas began, but Catherine raised her hand. Let me finish. She turned her eyes back to Emily. You made him happy in ways I didn't know were possible. You gave him a home, a family, a son. Her voice grew softer. You gave him love without conditions, without expectations, just love. And for that, Emily, I'm grateful, and I apologize for nearly driving you away. Emily felt tears burn her eyes. In 6 years, Catherine had never apologized, had never admitted wrong so directly. Thank you, she said softly. And for the record, you protected him the way you knew how. I don't blame you for that. Catherine nodded, something like relief crossing her face. Then, because she was Catherine Sterling and emotional moments needed to be balanced with practicality, she cleared her throat and changed the subject. Now, about Michael's 5th birthday party next month, I presume you've begun planning. Lucas and Emily exchanged glances, that kind of silent communication that comes from years of partnership. Actually, Lucas said, we were thinking something simple, a few friends from the playground, cake, maybe a clown. A clown? Catherine repeated, as if head suggested an entire circus. Well, if you insist on simplicity, I suppose I must respect that. But at least let me provide the cake. I know an excellent bakery. Of course, Catherine, Emily smiled. That would be lovely. That evening, after Michael finally fell asleep, a process that involved 3 stories, 2 songs, and an elaborate negotiation about just 5 more minutes, Lucas and Emily found themselves on the balcony again. The sky was darkening, stars beginning to appear, the night air bringing the sweet scent of honeysuckle. Lucas leaned against the railing, looking at the main mansion in the distance, its windows lit like a lantern. Emily approached from behind, wrapping her arms around his waist, resting her cheek on his back. What are you thinking? She murmured. About how strange life is. He covered her hands with his. 6 years ago, I was in that mansion feeling trapped, suffocated by expectations and obligations. So I hired someone to pretend to love me for one night. He turned in her arms, pulling her closer. And now, I'm here in this house, with you and our son, and for the first time in my entire life, I feel free. Emily touched his face, her thumb tracing the line of his jaw. You know what still surprises me? You keep saying that. He smiled. What surprises you this time? That all of this started with a lie. She looked deeply into his eyes. And now it's the truest thing I've ever had. Every challenging moment, every compromise, every time we chose each other, it all built this. Us. Lucas held her face between his hands, that gesture that had become their sign over the years. Nothing got canceled that night, he said softly, echoing the words Head said so many years ago at his cousin's wedding. Emily smiled through the tears of joy burning her eyes. Nothing got canceled. It was just postponed until you were ready to truly love me. And now you love me, and I love you, and we have a son who wakes up at 5:30 to talk about birds. She laughed. And somehow that's perfect. Lucas kissed her slow, deep, with the familiarity of 6 years and the passion that had never diminished. When they separated, he pressed his forehead against hers, eyes closed, just appreciating the moment. Thank you, he whispered. For what? For staying. For fighting. For choosing this complicated, imperfect, real love, instead of running when it got scary. Thank you for making me want to stay. Emily kissed him again softly. For showing me that belonging has nothing to do with money or status. It's about being loved exactly as you are. They stood there embraced under the emerging stars, the distant sound of Michael stirring in his sleep, coming through the open window, the gardens around them perfuming the night air. 2 worlds that should never have met. A lie that transformed into the deepest truth. And as night enveloped the Sterling property, Emily thought of all the choices that had brought them here, the good, the bad, the scary. She thought of the desperate girl who'd accepted $50,000 to pretend for one night. She thought of the man who'd knelt and transformed pretense into promise. And she realized that sometimes the best love stories start with a lie because it's the truths we build after truth, choice after choice, day after day, that create something that lasts forever. I love you, she whispered in the darkness. "I love you too," Lucas responded, holding her tighter. "Always." And in that moment, under the starry June sky, with their son sleeping peacefully inside, and years of imperfect but real love spread behind and ahead of them, Emily knew with absolute certainty she was exactly where she should be. Finally, truly home. Emily Cooper entered Lucas Sterling's life as a hired lie, $50,000 for one night of pretending. But what began as a transaction transformed into something no contract could contain: true love, imperfect and deeply human. She learned that belonging doesn't come from birth or wealth, but from being loved exactly as you are. Lucas discovered that vulnerability isn't weakness, it's the courage to love without guarantees. Together they built a home not on foundations of privilege, but on daily choices to stay, to fight, and to believe that love is worth every scary moment. 6 years later, with a son running through the gardens and scars transformed into wisdom, they prove that the best stories don't start perfect, they start real. And perhaps deep down, this story also speaks to us about having the